Thank you all for coming to the launch party for issue 30. I'm so excited for our 15th anniversary issue. My name's Trish Murphy, and I'm the founding editor of Superstition Review. And that kind of means that for 15 years, my full-time job at ASU has been running this magazine. And what an absolute joy. And two reasons it's joyful is I get to make such wonderful relationships with both contributors and editors, and I'm thrilled to see all of you here today. So in 15 years, 30 semesters, I've mentored almost 500 students through all the steps of running a literary magazine. So I teach them advertising, content curation, web design, blogging, social media marketing, project management, leadership, etc. And it's been such a joy, and I'm truly grateful for every student relationship I make. One of my great joys is maintaining friendships and mentorships with the students after they graduate. And I want to remind my graduating seniors that I'm always here for you. Nothing makes me happier than to write glowing references and strong letters of recommendation. I submitted 2 today because 'tis the season. And I also love helping students network and find jobs in grad school. I recently had a student from issue 2, so back in the day, 14 years ago, write to me and say, I have this great job and I don't have the time to do it. Do you have somebody who would like to take it over? Oh my gosh, what an amazing, it gives me goosebumps. What an amazing community of literary minded people we have. It's such a joy. So before we get into the program, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to everybody who contributes to the magazine. I think I saw Vanessa pop in. Vanessa is my uh, department head. Thanks to my dean, Joanna Grabsky, and to all my wonderful faculty advisors. I see Becky there. Um, Thank you for all of the work that you do with students.
Keep this on if you don't mind, because I'm
Oh
going to
yeah,
drive.
sure. And then, oops, let's mute everybody. Taylor, would you mind making sure everybody's on mute there? I think there's a setting for that, but I'm
Oh, hi, Deja.
yeah.
Congratulations on our surprise reading.
Whoops. Mute all. There we go. Okay. So I wanted to say that so the student editors are going to give presentations, and we'll also hear from our student editor-in-chief. I do want to highlight 4 people who do so much work behind the scenes that won't be speaking today. The first one is my advertising coordinator, Gigi Mendez, and she has done wonderful work soliciting ad exchanges with 500 other great organizations. We have Brenny Shoup, who is our blog editor. I think, yeah, oh, there's Brenny right there. We have clapping. Good to see you, Brenny. And Brenny has just done an amazing job in WordPress. I mean, she just got in there and ruled it, posting about 3 articles a week on the blog, a whiz at curating content, and a wonderful, wonderful writer. Our content coordinator, Anna Miller, who is here. Anna, thank you so much. We wouldn't have an issue without you. Anna built the entire issue. So when you, for our contributors who sent their work in, when you send that work in, the person behind your page is Anna, and she fixed all the HTML, she did all the proofing and everything. And then thank you to Kate, who has been such an amazing asset to the magazine for 4 semesters. She worked as our advertising coordinator for a semester, and then she was a trainee for a semester, and she has done social media for 2 semesters now. Just an incredible job managing our 9 social networks. And really, it was an interesting process because she grew our Twitter followers exponentially. And then after the takeover, all of a sudden the number dropped And she wrote to me and she said, "Did I do something wrong?" And I said, "Oh, no, you did not." We just had an exodus from Twitter. So I also want to really thank all of our issue 30 contributors who are here. It's so wonderful to see all of you. So Constance, Danny, Amy, Adesha, Cynthia, Gabriel, Jenny, who else do we have here? Mo, Patrick. Thank you all for your contributions to the magazine and for coming to our launch party. So now I'm going to hand it over to Taylor, who is our student editor-in-chief. And Taylor's been instrumental in the success of the magazine. She was an amazing blogger last semester, also a really quick study with WordPress, really, really wonderful writer. And this semester, Taylor has been a true inspirational leader for our team, managing the launch party, managing our mentoring, creating this Spotify account that y'all should go and listen to. Taylor, it's just been a joy to work with you.
Thank you, Trish. Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor Dilger, and I am the student editor-in-chief. Thank you so much for joining us today in celebration of issue 30 and our 15th anniversary. We are so thankful for all of your continued support over the years. Without our readers, this community of family and friends that we have built, our mission to promote contemporary art and literature from writers and artists in every corner of the world wouldn't be possible. I'm so lucky to have been the student editor-in-chief this semester because of all the fantastic editors and trainees I got to serve with. It was a semester full of changes, and our staff handled everything thrown their way and overcame obstacles with hard work and dedication. Hours were spent this semester on creating this remarkable issue, not to mention the time and effort put into cultivating a community. Even with other time commitments, they made time for each other to get to know one another and complete activities within the mentorship program we have here at SR. I have noticed their attention to detail, perseverance, dedication, and passion that have been poured into the final product of this issue. Our section editors have worked tirelessly to curate pieces from countless submissions and created a diverse set of voices full of life, power, and beauty. You will soon get to hear about their experience with the messages they discovered and the contributors they were inspired by. I would also like to mention our talented content coordinator who has been working to build the impeccable pages of the issue, and our blog editor, social media manager, and advertising coordinator who have been strategizing, creating, and sharing in order to connect with our audience and partners. The staff worked along ASU faculty advisors who generously gave us their time and wisdom. Thank you so much to everybody who has made this semester wonderful. Most of all, I would like to thank Trish Murphy, a person who radiates kindness, strength, and devotion. Next semester will be my 4th Superstition review, and I have worked very closely with Trish and seen what she does for this magazine and for her students. She helps us face challenges and teaches us valuable lessons to set us up for success. She recognizes our potential and pushes us until we discover our own strengths and abilities as writers, editors, and leaders. Her vision for this magazine inspires the SR team to produce work that we can be proud of. She continues to build her legacy of the magazine and help students grow within the internship program and out. Happy 15th anniversary, Trish. We are so grateful for you. And now I'd like to introduce our guest contributors who will be part of our contributor roundtable. Gabriel Granillo, Adesha Ray, Danny Rivera, and Rochelle Running. Gabriel Matthew Granillo is a writer and photographer. His works have appeared in both print and online journals, including Postcard Poems and Prose, Flash Fiction Magazine, and Timberline Review. Adesha Ray is a queer non-binary femme whose stories have been published in Necessary Fiction, Lightroom Magazine, Non-Binary Review, and Stone Canoe. Danny Rivera is the author of Ancestral Throat, a poetry chapbook published by the Finishing Line Press in 2021. Rochelle Running was born in Flagstaff, Arizona, and is of Trinidadian and American descent. A published photographer for over 25 years, Running's work has been internationally recognized. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we will now begin the Contributor Roundtable. We're going to present some questions gathered from our interns, and we will begin with question number 1 without further ado. Okay. Could you describe what the process was like when publishing your very first piece and how that process has changed since then? Are there things that you know now that you wish you would have known when you first began getting your works published? Danny, why don't we start with you? I'm so sorry, Danny, you're muted. Okay, you're unmuted.
There you go. First of all, hello to everyone. It's so exciting for me to be here, to be amongst a group of so many talented writers. It's a real privilege to be here. Taylor, your question was about publishing my first piece. I published my first piece, Taylor, in 2005. So I can't tell you honestly what that process was like. I will tell you that it was all done by mail. I sent in my packet of poems, like 3 to 5. And I heard back, in a note in the mail, snail mail, some 6 to 8 months later. I couldn't quite tell you honestly what the process was like entirely. What I'll say now, looking back all those many years ago, is that I probably should have worked on that poem a bit more. While I like that first published piece and I'm quite proud of it, I think the younger version of me was a bit too excited to have something workable, something publishable, something readable. At that time, I was in my second year of MFA at City College of New York. So there was a bit of, who's going to publish a poem first? Who's going to get that first publishing credit? So I think in a way I was working against myself. I wasn't working for the art, which I'm doing now, some 17 years later. So that's the long-winded answer to that question. Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good point, how much you changed when publishing your first piece. Adesha, would you like to provide some insight?
Sure. I'll give a couple snapshots of first pieces because I feel like I've started and restarted my writing many times. And there's kind of been 2 ways at it. When I was in high school, I was the founder of my high school literary journal, which was called Mindscapes. And so I published my first piece there with a lot of other people's work. And that ethic is something that I've kind of carried through my career, that if I didn't see the thing I personally needed, that I wanted to make it. And that continued on to when I was in my 20s, around the same time that Danny was publishing his first piece. I started a blog and then joined a group of people who were launching a magazine by and for sex workers called Spread. And I desperately needed sex working community. I was a very isolated sex worker at the time and wanted to get my voice out there, but also was like, who are these other people? How do we do this? And so writing and editing have always been very connected for me and very connected to being in community. And I think that's one of the things to me that continues to this day to be really important, that I like to have a community that I'm writing with and folks that we're sharing with. And also, I'll say that in the years, there have been many gaps between publishing pieces, and that I found that having that community and having those first readers to my work makes such a difference. And that, when you're not publishing, but you have, even like 5 people who are excited to read your work and are kind of cheerleading you, it's such an incredible thing. So that's really important too, not just the goal of getting it visible and out there.
Totally. Rochelle?
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much. It's such an honor to be sharing with you today. And this morning or just this afternoon, I learned that my mentor, Maestro Juan Quesada, passed away in a car accident. And at the beginning of this work that was shared with the first issue with the magazine was really came from an editorial job that took me down to Chihuahua, Mexico to photograph Maestro Juan Quesada and Mr. Spencer McCallum. And because of that incredible binational friendship, that's how I ended up photographing down in Mexico in these borderlands for the last 16 years. It was very interesting. The editorial never got published. And I ended up becoming an artist in resident for 3 months and stayed 5 years. And it kind of catalyzed me to do more editorial and writing for for some a Chinese magazine and Spanish speaking airline magazine. So I ended up writing to accompany my photographs to share these stories. So that's been one of the interesting aspects. And I ended up doing a 5,000 word essay for the Chinese magazine. And that was one of the ways of bridging the words and the imagery. And so because of Maestro Juan and Mr. Spencer McCallum, that's what helped me to see a bigger lens on these borderlands and how we're all connected. So oftentimes my work as a photographer has been inspired by other writers and the collaboration between the visual and the word and the word and the visual. So I see those as working hand in hand, whether it's in the book of The Family of Man or For Nothing Personal with James Baldwin and Richard Avedon. Those are the two of the strongest books that have influenced my life since I was a baby, and just seeing how those work together. And it's catalyzed me to be more than a photographer, but still always looking to finding the words and the people to help share those stories, as well as the binational or bilingual or multilingual ways of sharing what is happening and what we share as countries working together, or how we're right now separated, but those points where we come together.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story with us.
Thank you.
And Gabriel?
Yeah, I mean, I resonate, what Danny said resonates with me about the sort of, at the beginning of your publishing career, just sort of like, I don't know, just wanting to throw things out and like, it seems publishable. So I'm just gonna like try to submit it and try to get it somewhere. And I think not that I've like published a whole bunch, but of the pieces that have been published, I think it's kind of gone through fluctuations where like, I think the first few things I published were very, it's all deep in the reservoir of ideas that I've had for, a long, long time. And then at a certain point, it's just like, I'm trying to get some more words out there to, in an effort to be published or to be seen. And I think it's sort of gone back in the original direction where I think I'm trying to be a little bit more intentional with the things that I publish. And certainly I have some stories and some poems that I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to keep that for myself, or maybe a couple of people will see that and that won't be, the thing that I want to publish. And but certainly, it was super exciting, getting published the first time. It was, a sort of a game changer. It just like validated what I had felt inside for a long time. And it was very rewarding. And I feel like that feeling happens every time that I'm published. Again, not that I'm like, getting published a lot or anything, but when it happens, certainly it happened in this case when, my story was accepted here with the Superstition review. It was a very validating, rewarding feeling. And I guess as far as things that I would like to have known back then, that I know now, not that I, I'm a genius or anything, or that I know everything about publishing, but I, for myself, I think like just the amount of rejections and declines that you're gonna get is like that in comparison to your acceptances, you know, it's gonna look pretty vast, and it's like applying for jobs. It's gonna be like demoralizing. And so it's just like, you know, to stay true and to not, it's going to bother you, but to not let it bother you too much, and to really keep going along. And if you feel passionate about something and you're enjoying it, to, you know, don't get down on yourself, and to really just try to push through those feelings. So yeah, I don't know.
Awesome, thank you. When deciding which literary magazines to submit to, why did you choose Superstition Review? Audacia, why don't you start?
I had read some past issues, and I also really appreciated the collaborative effort that goes into the magazine. That's very close to my heart. And I think that the production of literature should be in community and created collectively, not just by one person slapping things up on the internet. So I love that, and I love the fact that so many people have passed through Superstition Review and have gone out into the world of literature. And I just really appreciated the strong voices that I read in the magazine.
Thank you. Rochelle?
There we go. Well, it was really nice. I actually saw the review on LinkedIn and saw a call. And so it had been almost 14 years since we had worked together. And I thought, oh, I should just reach out, and because it seemed like another cycle coming around in time. And so I've literally been documenting these borderlands for almost like 14, 16 years. And Patricia gave me that first opportunity. I believe that's where I first got my work shown from the borderlands. And this was during the time of SB 1070 in that critical time. And here we are 14 years later and where we're at now. So it just seemed another cycle of coming around the corner. And when the staff kind of chose the photograph of Maria Garcia, I just thought it was very significant to share an older woman and that continuum of what connects us through the Americas. So that was kind of what inspired me to just kind of complete that circle and start again. So oftentimes I think people think of time as linear. And when I work as a docent, I try to explain the history of time as if you take that line and spin it around, and it's more like a slinky. And I think that's something about literacy and literature and imagery, that it tells us something about ourselves, and to look back and again, just, you know, the significance of today, marking how significant and what that means and what it means for those stories to continue and long influence people. So that was one of those moments when, you know, I was trying to figure out LinkedIn and threw the dice. And so that's kind of my editorial way, is kind of throwing the dice, or I still make cold calls and actually call people and present articles or ideas for articles. So again, just wanted to say thank you for that opportunity to share this work at this significant time in history.
And I should say that Rochelle had the cover for issue 1. And so when the call went out on LinkedIn, she contacted me, and I was just absolutely thrilled. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for being such a longtime supporter.
Plus, I think it's something about Arizona, and this is our strength, is in that holding of these diverse cultures and communities. You know, even though politically we're very challenged right now, but at the heart, and I think that's our strength in our diversity.
Yes, that's great. Danny or Gabriel, would you guys like to add anything to
Yeah, I can go. I think for me there was a little bit of hometown pride in there. I lived in Arizona for some time. Actually went to ASU for a little while. So I had been familiar with Superstition for a little while. So it was yeah, just you know, like Rachel said, sort of rolling the dice and you know, really wanting to. I feel like after I moved from Arizona, I live in Portland now, but after I moved from Arizona, I feel like my writing has a little bit of a Southwestern flair to it. So I don't know, it just kind of fit. I thought with the journal a little bit. So and the story itself is sort of a Eddie B on the silver screen is a bit of a folk tale. And I appreciated that Superstition Review has the, you know, the oral concept where, you know, you can hear people read their poems or read their stories. And I thought that that was the most appropriate way to tell the story. So I was really excited about that fact. And then, yeah, it was just really exciting.
Thank you.
So for me, I tend to send out work to venues that have, you know, typically a long history of publishing quality work. As a writer, I want to share space with like-minded people that I want to be proud to share the stage with, right? I remember sending out a packet of poems to Superstition back in 2014. I got declined. At the time, really nice. So said something like, "We're not taking your poems, but the editor's like such and such section of your poem." And I haven't forgotten that. Even that small bit of kindness goes a long way to supporting our work. And so when I saw the call for Superstition Review earlier this summer, I thought, well, why not give it another chance, see whether or not this poem might land. And sure enough, you know, 8 years later, here we are.
How does your identity seep into your work? What themes are present within your work that reflects your identity? Rochelle?
Well, identity for myself has always been as an other. I come from the roots of the Caribbean. My mom was Afro-Caribbean and Chinese, and my father was Anglo from Buffalo, New York. So I've never really quite know, and still even at my age, I don't know which box to check off, and it's still, those boxes don't define me. But it's also this sense of being raised by my Caribbean mother with her lens on America, as well as my father's work with indigenous peoples and the human condition. All of those contributed to the idea of the human family. And I think that is what is at the core of who I am, is by not really fitting into anybody's box, that I can also be sensitive as a photographer or as a ambassador to help represent peoples who are often unseen. And this has been kind of my role ever since I started education in the school systems. It just didn't make a lot of sense sometimes not seeing where these other stories were, or we weren't as, I guess, mixed race or as brown, Black people. There's just not very much about our history as we're seeing now, those effects. So for me as a mixed race person, I feel like my lens helps to bridge my Anglo friends and community, as well as representing those voices of other voices and stories that rarely are seen or depicted or represented. And so that's one of the gifts that I really feel from my mixed race heritage. But sometimes it feels it is hard to find out where I fit in as a visual artist, because it's not, you know, it's not easy to be, I don't really fit into anybody's box very well. So that's something, as I get older, I feel it's really important to advocate and to give those voices. So even with the work that I'm doing now is about healing pathways to bring language and culture is a way for people to embrace those traditions in a time when a lot of people were not allowed to, or were shamed for speaking their traditional languages or beaten for that. So that's something as I grow older, that I feel has been a huge inspiration, and that I want to advocate for that, the diverse voices and stories for healing and connection for all.
That's a fantastic point. Thank you. Yeah. Audacia, what are your thoughts about this?
I mean, I think identity is very present in my work. I mean, my identity as a non-binary queer femme is in my bio. And I'm a survivor of a variety of different kinds of violence, and that plays into everything that I do, for sure. In the particular piece I have in this issue, Deeds and Intentions, I'm also working to make visible how whiteness plays into all of this, because like I do hold multiple marginalized identities. I'm also a white person who owns property. And so I was really trying to investigate that in this piece, and I feel like one of the kind of like 101 things that I hear is as a mistake that a lot of writing spaces have when they're majority white spaces, is that people do not identify whiteness as an identity. And I think it's really important to do that and to investigate how that works in the literature, how it works in the piece, and that whiteness is not a blank slate. It is not the absence of identity. And it's something that's very important to talk about and interrogate as part of how that plays out in the literary canon.
Great point. Danny.
When I first started publishing, 17 years ago, it was really, really difficult to find Latino surnames on the back of literary journals. I was desperate to find another Rodriguez, Rivera, Gutierrez, whatever. And I found this baffling because I knew that there were other Latina writers out there, but I couldn't see their names being published. And I couldn't figure out why that was. And so ever since then, things have changed, thankfully. But I make it a point to not only talk about my identity as a Latino by using Spanish and incorporating Spanish sometimes into my work, but also recognizing that I'm the son of immigrants from Colombia. They went through a lot to give me and my brother the life that we now have as Americans, to speak of identity, right? So thankfully, things have changed as I first started publishing. And I only hope that with issues like SR, that more names like mine will be more visible, frankly.
Thank you. What a great answer. Gabriel?
Yeah, I think I think identity, as I've started writing more and more, has played a lot more into my work, because it's just something I feel like I have to deal with every day. Being in a space that's mostly white, in a city that's mostly white, I feel like the otherness is pretty apparent, and it's been an interesting dilemma for me as a Latino who is fourth generation, who doesn't speak a whole lot of Spanish, so I feel like there are instances where I don't necessarily feel like a part of the Latin community, because I don't speak fluent Spanish, or because of the way that other folks treat me in that community. And I think that's most apparent in this story that is published here, where the main character is sort of dealing with those feelings as well. But I think that identity, has, like I said, as I've written more and more, has sort of come to play. It used to be a little more subtle in my writing, and now I think it's not overt, but I think it's something that I'm less afraid to talk about. I think sometimes I avoided it for one reason or another, but I think now it's something I am more comfortable contemplating and talking about.
Thank you.
Wonderful. that concludes our roundtable. Thank you to all of our contributors for having that conversation and entertaining the questions from our interns. I really appreciate that. And now what we've prepared for you is a presentation of the issue with comments by each of the editors. And so our art editor is not able to be here with us. So I'm going to read the piece that he has prepared while I show you the art section. That's going to be a lot of fun. Hold on. So this is the homepage. When we get into issue 30, we'll get into our art section. And our art editor for this issue was Devin. And here's what Devin had to say about curating this issue. Our cover artist, Rochelle Running, whose work was included in SR's first issue, has spent years photographing life on the US-Mexico border. Working alongside the Rancho Feliz Foundation, Running dismantles boundaries by showing the compassion between the communities divided by our border. Valentina Grenier's work advocates for our planet and the ecological concerns it faces in a scarce environment. Shireen Malat Gahor explores her national identity through the artistry inherited during her childhood in the Iran-Iraq War. Corey Pressman's encaustic art uses the color and form of everyday life to understand the states of being that are otherwise difficult to comprehend. And finally, Jenny Wu's sculptural paintings make light of the sensationalist perspective of materialism and all its ironies. Thank you, Devin, for curating such a fantastic section. Now I'm going to go to our fiction editor, Abigail Leon Zavala.
Hi, everyone. I'm Abigail. I wrote a few words on the fiction stories, so I'll go ahead and get started with that. With his lyrical prose, Patrick Thomas Henry shows us images of a moment in time. He presents a relationship between siblings that lasts beyond a picture and is truly burned within a memory. And Michael Colbert provides an underwater look at sexuality and the importance of trust when on a self-discovery journey. Gabriel Garnillo creates a literary folktale that gives meaning to value and ambition, showing us just how far individuals may go for the things they deem worthy. Mo Shalabi portrays the power of women and their strength and wit, despite forces that try to deplete them of that energy. Amy Reardon depicts the internal battle some women face when acknowledging sexual assault, shining a light on traumatic experiences in order to provide some clarity towards the correct steps. And through the characters' dialogue, Morris Collins uses a satirical lens to critique and analyze the often mundanity and repetition of work life. J.T. Townley uses stereotypical gender-based roles to create a new narrative, one that doesn't rely on normalcy.
Wonderful. Abigail, thank you so much. It's been a joy to work with you. And we're going to hear from our second fiction editor, Maggie LaCourte.
Hi there, I'm Margaret. I'll start with Patrick Thomas Henry's piece. He portrays the loveliness inherent in nostalgia, remembering growing up with a sibling in a series of snapshots that underscore its sentimental significance. Morris Collins depicts the oft redundant nature of work life in his hilarious satirical piece. J.T. Townley traverses multiple typically male-centric environments with a female lead in this empowering gender-bending work. Gabriel Granillo's Bildungsroman follows the path of Eddie V., a child film star as he outgrows his relevancy, a true depiction of this struggle. Michael Colbert explores themes related to sexuality in this magical realist tale about merfolk. And Amy Reardon embodies the realities of moral duality in this compelling depiction of women's struggles with sexual assault. In his piece on possession, Mohammed Shalabi empowers each female character in his depiction of life in rural Arab communities.
Wonderful. It was so much fun to work with you. It was such a privilege to curate this section of the issue. Thank you very much for all your work. I'm going to go to Rich now. Are you awake? I wouldn't be at midnight. Rich is our interview editor for issue 30, who single-handedly wrote 5 interviews. And Rich, I'll let you take it away.
Rudy Ruiz's Valley of Shadows brings Mexico into Technicolor in a fight against the curse of machismo, directly on the rift of a disputed border. Loved ones never truly leaving us, even in death. Manuel Munoz returns us to 70s California and its Chicano communities and the consequences, to explore what we owe to one another in crises and whether obligations are enough to make us stay. The essays of Brown Neon land us in the now of the Southwest borderlands. Raquel Gutierrez, so deliberate and conscientious in their approach to the intersections of brownness and queerness in a political climate that is increasingly hostile towards both. Leopoldo Gout draws on the unfathomable hurt of the colonized in Piñata, playing with the typical archetypes and crafting an iconic horror story in which readers recognize and ache for the abject, the monster. And we get a taste of incredible resilience in Angie Cruz's How Not to Drown in a Glass of Water, a monologue of a woman having to start again after a long life of escape and determination to make it in America, her persistence and community catching her after this fall.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rich. And I should clarify, I say it would be hard to be awake because you're in Spain. And I can't thank you enough for your vision in choosing all of these authors. I think that your standing as a double major, English and Spanish, has made you an incredible reader and writer. I am so thrilled with your work, and I'm so grateful. So, and thank you for staying up and being with us.
Thank you.
All right, so now let's go on to nonfiction, and we will hear from Bailey Wood.
Okay, so the nonfiction section includes a variety of stories and subjects that examine moments of human experience. In A Recollection of Youth, Brooke White takes us on a journey to a small island in Greece where she searches for herself in a summer between graduation and the rest of her life. Carlo Ray Lacasamana examines a woman's life in 3 acts whose behavior conjures hope. Cassandra Whitaker writes an essay about gender, prompting the question, what do we teach about with our bodies? Kaya Prius offers a narrative which expresses a desire to believe in life after death through conversations with the dead. Audacia Ray challenges John Burroughs in a conversation of nature and civilization.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bailey. It's been such a joy to work with you. The nonfiction section is always a treat. We literally get stunning essays, and it is very hard to narrow them down. So Bailey and Taylor have done some great work here. Taylor, we'll have you talk next, please.
Okay. I felt the cultural differences, the language barriers explored within Calore Laxamana's The Balcony in 3 Acts. For him to utilize a song in a language he did not understand, yet have such a powerful reaction to it, exhilarating. Cassandra Whitaker's natural voice is striking. They're aware of how the human body cannot be objectified when it is as fluid as water. Expectation versus reality is complicated through John W. Evans, forcing us to examine why we put people on pedestals. Kaya Prius manipulates language to develop her internal conflict of contradictions. Brooke White washes her reader over with a wave of prose that transports us to a memory within her mind. Distortion that bleeds into reclamation is the foundation that which Audacia Ray's deeds and intentions thrives.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Taylor. What a joy to work with you. And another joy is that a lot of students come back and work with me for many semesters. So I have several who will be returning. Rich is going to do interviews again in spring. And some are graduating too. So Abigail, congratulations. Yes. But what a great joy to work with all of you. I'm going to move now to Ajay, who was on the poetry team and We did a lot of reading, huh? All right.
As my favorite poet, Rita Dove, once said, poetry is language at its most distilled and most powerful. And each contributor to this issue's poetry section embodies a sentiment in their work and serve as exemplars of Rita Dove's powerful statement. Charlie Peck paints a visceral and personal depiction of addiction and sobriety. Constance Hansen and Rebecca Griswold, in their respective poems, share personal insights into their experience of pregnancy and loss. Danny Rivera's poem, Dispatch from the Last Century, provides a penetrating meditation on terror. Joanne Diaz's poem, Facts and Review, paired with Jason Roblano's palpable image, is a reflection of Nazi book burning and the parallels with the current social climate. Natalie Giarratano's two poems are a study of her own white privilege and society's proclivities to reward whiteness. Remy Recchia's poem, Amuse-Bouche, metaphorically provides criticism of transphobic perceptions and personal insight into gender dysphoria. Yang Yu Huang's beautifully constructed poem, Wasteland, is a nostalgic reflection on her previous self. Susan L. Leary's poignant collection precisely encapsulates the power of and the pain of losing a loved one. Cynthia Marie Hoffman's poems reflect the essence of themes of compulsive order and anxiety. Rachel Nelson's cohesive collection showcase the African and African American folktales that speak to a larger metaphor of racial injustice. And Catherine Bratt Fottenhauer's work is a visceral two-poem voyeuristic narrative about violence. All of these poems have a distinct and powerful voice and insights into the contributors' most personal experiences in these pieces. And we are extremely honored to share them with you and hope that they move you all in the same way that they moved us when we first read them.
OJ, thank you so much. It's been a delight to work with you. And you're a literature major. So this was quite a challenge because usually the poetry editors are creative writing majors. You're an amazing reader. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you. And now we go to Maddie. What a fun team we had. We had like star-studded team here. Maddie, and it was a joy to work with you. Let's hear what you have to say.
Okay. We have published 12 poets in this issue, and every poem is a target on the poet's back, and they wear it with honor. Charlie Peck writes about avoidance of the truth and growing not only from child to adult in age, but in maturity and decision-making. Constance Hansen and Rebecca Griswold focus on pregnancy and loss from a scientific perspective at first, and then from the perspective of struggling mothers. Danny Rivera discovers a new word for terror. Joanne Diaz, in collaboration with photographer Jason Roblando, lists facts that seem all too harrowing for the current state of the world. Natalie Giarratano checks her own privilege as well as the privilege of her readers, pointing out the hardships of not being white that she sees in the world. Although it first reads as a piece about celery, Remy Recchia's poem Amuse-Bouche is a pantoum about being denied an identity. Yang Yu Huang writes, "Why is everything slouching closer to my heart?" Susan L. Leary approaches the process of losing a loved one in her 4 poems, and Cynthia Hoffman features a puzzled speaker talking themselves out of anxiety. Rachel Nelson writes about racism, finishing with black traces that cannot be rinsed away from the bark in her last poem, Tar Baby Dreams of Home. Our poetry section ends with Catherine Bratt Fottenhauer, who writes beautifully about consent and not only violating, but also mutilating an animal. If I could summarize a theme for this issue's selections, I would call it grief. Every author strung a bit of grief into their poems, grief about something lost. Every author took the time to say what needed to be said at some point in their life or the life of another. There was no hesitation. I admire their honesty, their risk, their speaker, their content. If you sit and read each of these poems, I think you may find a bit of yourself in them, the same way I did. And if you don't, you are lucky. You have never had to wear a target on your back.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Maddie. What a wonderful tribute. It's been a joy to work with you. Well, I'm brimming with pride for so many reasons, not just for such a wonderful issue, but for all of the hard work that went into it and all of the memories of the conversations that we had. Just a touch about our editorial process is that we have meetings as editors to discuss the pieces that come to the forefront of the group, and those conversations change me every single time. I learned so much from these discussions, and I'm so grateful for them. So we left about 10 minutes at the end to have some questions. So I wonder, Taylor, do you want to start us off with maybe one of the other questions that the interns had, and we'll open it up to the floor.
Yes, of course. What's your process of moving from an idea to a finished work?
Big one.
I actually start actually looking, doing research and looking at books a lot, and going back and forth between the words and the imagery, and trying to find that process to make some other notes, and it's kind of builds upon, but it's very much like onion peeling, but also as you unfold one thing, and oftentimes it happened in Mexico, it's like you'd get lost and ask for directions, and you'd get 3 people telling you 3 different directions. But now I see, like, and each of those would lead to some other place, but then you see how they kind of connect again. So that's been something that I've experienced when I went to learn about Mata Ortiz and Casas Grandes. It's been an incredible experience to just see how it's all interconnected all the way through ages and through different cultures, and those are those things that I try to weave in my photo illustrations in those stories. So definitely it's the words and the imagery, and those artists and writers who've gone before me are the ones who are kind of the grandfathers who I follow, or the, you know, they're the elders who I follow.
Excellent. Would anyone else like to answer the question? What's your process of moving from idea to finished work?
I can do that. It depends. It's that answer. I'm a pretty fast drafter, and it just depends on, like, I like to get something out of my body, out of my brain, and then what happens next really is very variable. I used to be a blog editor who was responsible for publishing 5 pieces a day. So it was basically like, first draft is it, which is kind of terrifying. And now it's not something I would do. And I really relish taking my time. So for this particular piece, for Deeds and Intentions, it was like, I would go on a hike, the same hike over and over again. And I started drafting this piece in 2017, so a couple of years pre-pandemic. And it was one thing, and then it was another, and it kept kind of shifting. And I kept walking around in the forest and also doing research and feeling mad at John Burroughs. And yeah, and so it just took a while to kind of brew and to figure it out. And I think that you know, letting yourself rush through is also great. Like, I honestly don't regret a lot of the early stuff that I wrote, that I was like, I write it, I hit post, like, move on to the next. And it's also fun to savor a longer process, and to learn from the piece, learn from rereading the piece. And sometimes one of the things that I do also is that I draft really fast, I let it sit a while, and then I rewrite from memory without reading the piece again. And one of the things that I find pretty consistently is that there's always like one line that I write almost exactly the same the second time. And so that's the thing I hone in on. And then I take that and figure out what that means, what that's saying.
Would any students like to answer the question? I like Brenny's face. I take that as a no.
Okay, we can ask another question.
Okay, let's grab another question.
Did the pandemic pose any serious challenges to your creative processes, or did the period of isolation lead you to explore different themes in your work?
I'm happy to share that. For me, the pandemic, I was actually working with Rancho Feliz and Gilgillen Water for their book about the Border Virgin, which is a sculpture that is Santa Muerte and Guadalupe hand in hand. And so I spent and still reflect this time of looking at life and death and how they are like sisters as metaphors for their philanthropy projects in Mexico for the last 33 years. So I lived literally with those statues and the photographs and weaving these stories visually to accompany Gil's words and to interpret the sculpture's symbolism. And that's still continuing now. And I see that so many people, even with so many people who've passed away from COVID and from other things, like I just still feel like we have not collectively mourned that loss. And I feel that, you know, all of you as writers and creators and all of us in this genre, it's just like we're in a critical time where I still feel like our society has not even realized what has happened, and that it's going to be the artists and the writers who help people to interpret and to process their emotions and get in touch with them. So I think that's what I've noticed in this time of isolation, living down here in Bisbee and close to the border, is like this huge big disconnect as well as we're trying to connect. So those are things that I've learned from this time of isolation. And I still feel like I'm a little bit of prairie dogging, like kind of poking around and looking around. And I just still feel like we're missing our humanities link as we're kind of moving more to AI. And again, you know, it's like we're less focused on what are people emotionally processing. But I also feel that the violence that we're seeing in the world is also a reflection of the pain and that grief that the writers or some of the poets have been sharing, because that's when people need our poems and our pictures to help them to understand this human experience.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. We're at 4:58, so I think maybe we'll call that a wrap. I am so appreciative to all of you, and I thank you for carving out an hour to spend with us today. To all of our contributors, we ask that you share your good news with us. One of the things we love to do is distribute that through our social networks. So let us know about your next publication or your next book. We always welcome you to do a blog post, get some more publications going. And to all of the students, again, I can't thank you enough for your work. It's been such a fun semester. Like, I've really enjoyed this group, and it's just been an absolute joy. And what a wonderful life to have 15 years of creativity and joy. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, everybody. Gracias.
Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go in peace.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Danny.
Hi, y'all.
Adios. Oh, hi, friends.
Thank you.
There we go.